$70 trillion in debt, rising interest rates, a recipe for disaster, a recipe for an economic collapse. In this video, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. What are the signs that are pointing towards an economic collapse, and how can we prepare for a collapse so that we can sleep easy at night? If we take a look at the financial accounts of the United States, we can see that the total debt from all sectors is $70 trillion. At the time of making this video, it is $71.5 trillion and growing. As you can see that we have had a slight blip in debt after the 2008 financial crisis, but since then it has done nothing but grow. We have piled on an extra $20 trillion after the last market crash. So you don't have to know too much about debt to comprehend that $71 trillion in debt is a lot of money. The US are playing a dangerous game. So let's look at where some of this debt is coming from. US household debt is now over $13 trillion. Now this is just the culture that we are in. I like to call it the paycheck to paycheck culture. We earn money and we spend it. But we're not just satisfied with our current earnings, we have to borrow more, because obviously our income is not enough for us. So that is why the average American spends 10% of their income on debt payments. Now, where is this $13 trillion of debt coming from? One, it's coming from home loans. And I don't mind that debt too much. I understand that we often need to borrow to purchase our first home, our first major asset. Two, it's coming from auto loans. And I see this pattern all the time, especially amongst youngsters. They want to impress their mates, they want to impress the girls. So before they have even started earning proper money, they go and buy a car for 10 grand. And 8,000 of that is borrowed money, with ridiculously high interest rates behind it. Before they have even left school, they are on the back foot. They have started the downward spiral of constantly having to pay that loan. 3, it's going to student loans. Please don't get me started on student loans. Universities are making a killing from providing a subpar education. It's more of a business than anything these days. A 4-year course at a private university, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, costs more than $250,000. After you have got this education from universities, you now spend the rest of your life trying to pay back that hefty loan. As I say, it's a business these days for colleges. They are making a killing off you, and that is why we have $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. Now, a few types of degrees may be worth your student loan. If you want to be a doctor, lawyer, accountant, maybe that loan is worth it. But I am of the firm belief that most degrees are not in the least worth that debt. Let me know in the comments if you think I am wrong. And the fourth area of household debt is from credit loans, and this is just the general spending of money on things that we can't afford. Our late night Amazon purchases, our daily coffee, all of these expenses add up, and a lot of Americans use a credit card to afford it. Guys, it's an all-round culture of spending money instead of learning to save and learning to invest. Over the past 10 or so years, we have enjoyed extremely low interest rates. Now, when you have high amounts of debt and interest rates are low, you're not going to be too worried about your debt. Why? Because your payments are going to be hardly anything. The federal funds rate was about 0.25% for a good 7 years, meaning if you had debt during that time, your interest payments on that debt were extremely low. But interest rates are climbing. From 2016, they hiked up from 0.25% to 2.25%, and the Fed expects to continue to raise rates in the future. They want to hike rates an extra 3 times in 2019. So, what happens when you've got extremely high amounts of debt in a nation, $71 trillion in total, and you combine this with rising interest rates? It means those debt payments are going to be harder to pay back. They're going to increase. The rates on your mortgage for households will increase. Businesses will have added payments, expenses that they will struggle to service. Their profit will start to slow down. Their output will slow down or even decrease. Everything ends up piling in on itself, and it causes an economic crash. Now, one of my pet peeves is when you get these economists or analysts come out and say, we will definitely see a market crash in 2018. There's a stockbroker called Peter Schiff, who's actually a very smart man, but it's as if every year we are definitely going to see a market crash with him. Rumor has it that he has predicted the last 5 of the 3 market crashes. And now he's saying that we will see a market crash while Trump is president. And the thing is that no one can say for certain exactly when we will see an economic collapse. If you could tell, you would be rich. What we can do, however, is look at certain data, certain patterns that tell us if an economic collapse is likely to happen or not. And at the moment, we do have a number of factors that are pointing towards dangerous signs of an economic collapse. We have high amounts of national debt, we have rising interest rates, we've waited 10 years since our last crash, and it seems that we're about due for another one. So, these factors tell us that we must at least be prepared for an economic collapse. They do not tell us exactly when it is going to happen. So the first strategy that is a must is to have a decent amount in savings. As we talked about before, most people will do the opposite. They get their income, and their first instinct is to spend. And if you think and behave to what the 4% are doing, which is saving, ahead of what the 96% of people are doing, you will come out a lot better in an economic collapse. You see, bad things happen in a collapse. Businesses start to lose money, which means they have to lay off a good amount of workers or perhaps decrease pay. And this can happen to you. If it does happen to you, you want something to fall back upon. And this is why you should have a year's worth of expenses saved up so that if anything goes wrong, you do not have to panic and can get back on your own 2 feet. Dave Ramsey's third step to financial freedom is to build up 3 to 6 months of savings. If the market does collapse, I think you want to have a year's worth of savings to last you through the worst of times. Interest rates are still reasonably low, at least comparing it to historical standards. So now is the time to start paying off your debt. I, like Dave Ramsey, recommend paying off your debt smallest to largest. Start getting momentum and getting into the habit of paying off debt. Pay off the credit card debt that no one should have. Pay off your auto loan. Maybe even downgrade your car to do so. Yes, what a crazy thought. And of course, start paying off your mortgage. Because one of the worst things that can happen is you get laid off from your job and you have a family to feed. You have no savings and you still have constant debt payments. In times of panic, gold and silver are an asset that people run to. If you look at the history of gold and silver, you will see that they are a commodity that is notorious for doing well in a market crash. This is just because people see gold and silver as safe assets to invest in that they can trust. So, one good strategy is to have around 5 to 10% of your portfolio in precious metals. One of the best market timers, Ray Dalio, recommends this, and so do a bunch of other smart investors. As you can see that in the last market crash in 2008, gold was in the positive and did extremely well in the periods after a market crash. And step 4 is to develop and write down a plan of what you're going to do in an economic collapse. Write out your current finances. What are your sources of income? What are the assets that you own and the liabilities that you owe? What will you do if you get laid off in an economic collapse? What backup options do you have? You see, if you have this in a plan, you will already know what to do in a collapse, and nothing will catch you by surprise. If you do not have a plan, you might begin to act with your emotions instead of your brain, and end up making bad decisions for both you and your family. The thing about an economic collapse is that it catches everyone off guard. That's why they call it a collapse, because it happens so quickly. You know what they say, the bull climbs the stairs, but the bear jumps out of the window. This means a bull market takes time to build up and grow, but a bear market happens suddenly, severely, and fast. So, don't be one of those people that is caught off guard and swept up in an economic collapse. The key is to start preparing now, instead of when it is too late.